Welcome everyone to today's panel. The panel is one of the series of panels that Disability Rights New York has been putting on this past year, commemorating the horrors of Willowbrook and the ongoing challenges that we as a community face with regards to accessibility and integration. Transportation is a critical part of our daily lives, and it is so necessary for true integration. But for some of us, the relationship is complicated and it includes challenges that others may not recognize. This meeting is being recorded, as I mentioned earlier. Please feel free to put questions into the chat. We will share them towards the end after the speakers have had a chance to introduce themselves. We may not have a chance to get to all of the questions, but we still value your participation. I'm now going to turn the floor over to Jeremy. He is Disability Rights New York's Community Integration Fellow. He's going to be the moderator for this panel, which includes John Robinson, founder and CEO of Our Ability, and is Anna Zivarts, Director of Disability Mobility Initiative Program from Disability Rights Washington, and Jessica Murray, Disability Rights Advocate and producer of the 2022 documentary, The Biggest Obstacle.
Good afternoon, everybody, or I guess good evening. It's getting kind of dark out there. I'm going to put, before we start, the link to the survey for the end of the event into the chat, and then when we get to that portion, it'll be available for everyone to answer. All right, so why don't we start off by having our panelists introduce themselves. Let's start with Jessica.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Murray. I'm a disability rights advocate, as Jeremy said. I wear a few different hats right now. I'm the chair for the Advisory Committee on Transportation Accessibility to the MTA, and we meet regularly and discuss small and large accessibility problems and try to make incremental changes where we can. I'm also working on a couple of different disability rights history projects at the moment. We're creating a new archive about New York City disability rights activism and trying to preserve documentation of the activism that happened in New York City, which was really at the forefront of the disability rights movement when it started gaining ground in the 70s and 80s. And I'm also working on another related project, the New York City Civil Rights History Project, where we're taking a look at the history of education access and the struggles for equal access to education and struggles against segregation based on race and disability. And that website will be available sometime next summer.
Hey, John, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. John Robinson, CEO of Our Ability, pronouns he, him. I just got my hair cut, so I've got a buzz cut sitting behind my desk with a blue shirt and a blue shirt. And yes, Lindsay, I remember you. So I got a private note. Lindsay just said, do you remember me? Yes, I do. There's a lot of familiar names on Zoom, so it's great to see the names of familiar people and meet some new friends. Our Ability is an 11-year-old company that we have been working to build employment for individuals with disabilities and to create a pathway for companies to speak to and recruit individuals with disabilities. So that's what we do. That's our day job. But obviously I'm a quad amputee, 3'9", without the extension of my arms and my legs. And so disability has been part of my whole life. Transportation has been part of my whole adult life. And so this is a great conversation to have and to talk about, and its intersectionality with employment and what employment brings is extremely important. My perspective personally in my employment journey, so you should know, I went to Syracuse University to study television, radio, film in the late 80s. And to do that and to get around such a big campus that was on a big snowy hill with lots of slush and potholes was to learn how to drive. And the accommodation that the university made for me was that I would be able to park near my classes. And so 3'9", again, quad amputee, my parents taught me with the approval of the state of New Hampshire to learn with hand controls to drive my mother's car and eventually take over my mother's car. I've used hand controls my whole life. But as I have gotten older, I have appreciated that value to me personally, and then also realized the loss that I have in public transportation, because it becomes very hard for me to use public transportation when I'm in a big city. So I have sort of the opposite experience with transportation. But accessibility is vital to everything that we do in assisting individuals with disabilities and communicating with large companies. And what, accessibility is extremely important with companies in recruiting people with disabilities. And there's no better item that we should be working on than to be able to transport ourselves. And so whether it be private or public transportation, this issue is extremely important. So I'm proud that our ability does discuss this and work with municipalities and state governments and companies, especially on this topic.
Thanks. Anna, I think it's your turn.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Zivarts. I am a white woman in my late 30s, and I'm pretty close to the screen because I am low vision. I was born with an eye condition called nystagmus, which means that my eyes wiggle all the time, and I do not drive. I've never been able to drive legally. I have tried to drive unsuccessfully. I have driven into a tree in high school. And professionally, I currently work for Disability Rights Washington out in Washington State. I direct a program focused on mobility access, transportation access for people who can't drive or don't have reliable access to a car. So,
Anna, can you speak a little louder or maybe adjust your microphone? You're a little bit.
oh gosh.
The sound
All
is
right,
not
let me
there.
turn this up. Is this a little better?
That's a little better, yeah.
All right, I'll crank it all the way up.
Oh,
I-
maybe a little louder.
Too loud?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I was recording a video the other day and it I had to turn it way down because I was peeking out. Yeah, so I direct the Disability Mobility Initiative. It's a program at Disability Rights Washington focused on the mobility needs of non-drivers. And that includes people like me who can't drive because of our disabilities, but we also wanted to be able to work intersectionally and engage with youth who are too young to drive, don't have driver's licenses yet, engage with folks who are aging out of driving, as well as folks who can't afford a car or don't have documentation or can't legally drive for other reasons. And so our work is, how do we improve our transportation systems? How do we build more affordable housing close to the places we need to be? How do we fix sidewalks? All the things that will make it possible for all of us to be able to participate in our communities. So that's my story.
Great. So I think that's great. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, I think. So now I just had some sort of general questions for each of you to chime in on, just to sort of give our presentation about transportation and accessibility some wider context. So why don't we start with you, John? So we're now 32 years after the passage of the ADA. And what would you say that we've gotten right in terms of making transportation more accessible? And where would you say that we still have a lot of work to do?
What have we gotten right? That's great. Well, we passed a law and some of us follow it, which is great. So there's the beginning of right. Listen, I think everything in our society, especially with disability, is a work in progress. And I think we have to recognize that. And I love, Jeremy, how you phrase that we're 32 years after the signing of the ADA. We're relatively young in this whole thing, and a lot of us that are working towards different pathways for people with disabilities want it done yesterday. And the truth is, to get society to follow along with legislation takes time. And so we have to recognize that. I think it's fantastic that we have passed laws and demand in those laws that there is, there's accessibility for our community. It's really, really important. And then it comes into the practical nature of everything, right? What was built prior to the law what can be retrofitted, how is the retrofit, you know, in comparison to new, and how do we all move forward in that? That's where, you know, that's where we get into a situation. I think what we now have to do is to be vocal and cognizant when reality does not meet the law and does not meet implementation. Got a good friend of mine that's blind, has a guide dog, travels all over the world because he's an artist, and constantly gets kicked out of Ubers or not let into Uber or Lyft because of his service animal. You know, that's a situation that obviously a lot of us that know about that are working on, but at that moment when he can't get a ride, that's a problem, right? And so here's where we, you know, disability rights advocates, our ability, everyone listening, can be vocal when we see, I'll use the word injustice, but maybe we should soften a little bit, but can be vocal when we see situations like that or hear about situations like that, because we all need to lift each other up in this. And that's another part of the disability conversation, especially around the laws that have been enacted after, you know, with the ADA, is that something that affects me, it shouldn't just stop with me, right?
Right.
Conversely, I'm an amputee, but I care more about my friend who's blind that can't get in the Uber because I can. And so we in the disability community need to work with and think about all of our brothers and sisters in the disability community so that we can collectively get to some better universal design. You know, go back to the universe of getting onto public transportation. I'm in Albany, but I navigate New York City a lot, and it's easier for me to get into an Uber than try to figure out the subway nonsense. But if I'm in London, it's easier to take a train because a lot of it was retrofitted after 2012 and the Paralympics. So, and if I go to Sydney, Australia, it's the easiest situation I've ever been in to be on public transportation because it was built with all of that in mind. So we have to be cognizant of it. We have to work together across different disabilities and different advocacy agencies to help one another so that we can be, you know, get to better outcomes. And that's what I see. And so, you know, for us, it's talking about injustice, it's working towards justice, it's explaining, and it's demanding. And that's what we hope to do, because ultimately that will help employment, which is what we care about.
Right. Thanks. Jessica, how about you? It's the same question. So, you know, we're 32 years after the ADA. What have we gotten right, and where do we need to do some work?
Well, I actually want to talk about a couple of things that I feel like maybe haven't gone right. And I think, you know, the ADA is like about 40% of the text relates to transportation. If you count all the words and you look at the things that talk about transportation, 40% is about transportation. And so I think that emphasizes the importance. And you know, like I said, a lot of this stuff happened in New York City. It was the basis for much of the ADA for paratransit. For example, like that idea stemmed from New York City and the activism here. I think some of the things that that could have gone better out of that conversation is, you know, I think the idea of like giving people a percentage of something, like we'll make X percent of stations accessible and that should be okay. Like, I think that was not really a great route. And I know, I mean, I've talked to many of the advocates that were involved in those discussions, and it was kind of the consensus is kind of like that was the best we could do at the time. And it was a compromise. But I think, you know, like the key station agreement, for example, it went through a few iterations. It was part of a lawsuit that actually preceded the ADA. And they started out with a small number of stations, increased it to 100 stations. There's almost 500 stations if you count Staten Island in the New York City subway system. So that's only about 20% of the stations that people were pushing for to make accessible. And through a weird interpretation of the law, New York City and the MTA decided that 100 was more or less what they had to do. And so, you know, they've been renovating stations for, you know, many years without putting elevators in direct violation of the ADA, and just kind of like waiting for people to come back and sue. So I think, you know, that whole system was it was just very flawed in many ways, because you have to have people that are willing to take on a lawsuit when they do wrong and when they don't follow the law. And that's not always easy to do. And I know we're going to talk about the recent settlement later, but another thing that came out of that was that the people who were the loudest and could be in the room with the MTA were the ones that got the stations in their neighborhoods. So Manhattan is where almost all of the accessible stations are. If you go out into the boroughs, there are entire swaths of subway where, you know, you go 7 or 8 stops and there's not an elevator the whole way. So I think, you know, what's actually come out of it has become a very unequal system that impacts low income and minority communities more harshly. And, you know, they're the ones that really need the public transit to be able to get around.
Right.
So I don't want to be negative, because I mean, obviously there is progress, and, you know, this lawsuit settlement, even though it's going to take them 30 years to kind of get most of the way there, I think it's a big step forward. I think the work we need to do, and I'm a big proponent of this, and I get sometimes people really don't agree with me, but I think we need to try to show people more how this affects everyone, not just people with disabilities, every single person. And it's about, you know, your families and your loved ones. It's about you in the future when you're old and your knees and your back give out. Or you lose your vision. Like all of us are susceptible. And I think trying to expand the message and really bring in everybody. It's not just about disabled people. Accessibility like affects everyone. And I think it obviously affects people with disabilities to a much greater degree. I did a dissertation about the psychological impacts of how these barriers like impact people, and really the effect was like the strongest for disabled people, no matter what their disability. And so I think it's part of the awareness and advocacy challenge is that people are not going to go out and fight for something unless it directly affects them. And so you have people that may be sympathetic to a cause, but until they're personally affected by it, they're not really going to go out there and fight for it. So I think we have to really try to like build coalitions, not definitely among different disability groups, but also just with anyone who's interested in social justice, and try to get them to see the big picture and think about their future.
Right. This is an issue that affects everyone, whether or not they see it. And I guess that's the whole point. That's why we're here, so that we can spotlight that it's an everybody problem. Thanks, Jess. Anna, same question.
Yeah, no, such a good question. And I think what Jessica was just saying is something that I want to sort of continue that thread with. You know, I feel like sometimes, I guess my background before I became connected to the disability community was with the labor movement and working with low-income immigrants and lots of immigrants of color who were working low-wage service sector jobs. And I saw, you know, the importance of building these broader coalitions and being able to work beyond a strict sort of identity as a way to build power. And so I think that's something that we need to do as the disability community much more than we are today. And I struggle sometimes with the ADA because, you know, you only get protections as a disabled person if you're able to argue that you are somehow different and special. You're a special person that needs special things, right?
Right.
And that makes it really challenging because, for example, with sidewalks, you know, if a sidewalk is missing a curb ramp, you can say that disproportionately impacts disabled people. But if there's no sidewalk at all, that's not considered an ADA violation, unfortunately. And so the only way we can win the construction of sidewalks where they don't exist, which is, I know, less of a thing in New York City, but out in the West, where there's so many neighborhoods built without sidewalks, it's a real barrier to getting around, and it's a barrier for everyone. And so some of the work that we're doing is really trying to focus on how we can build that bigger tent so that we have more political power to win the things, to get the budget that we need to really make the changes.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Hang on, let me see. All right. So yeah, this question, so I wanted to get everybody's perspective on, I think we all have an idea in our heads of what obvious barriers to transportation are, but sort of piggybacking on, Jessica's point that this is an issue that affects everybody. What are some sort of invisible or less visible barriers to transportation that, wouldn't strike, let's say, the non-disabled person immediately? Do you want to start, Jess?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about some of the things. When I was doing my dissertation, I read probably every research article on this topic, which there are not that many. So people, were trying to kind of working with different people with different types of disabilities to figure out what the barriers to them are. And there's the obvious ones like lack of curb cuts, lack of elevators or ramps, lack of tactile wayfinding. Like we still don't really have that in a meaningful way in the subway. There's kind of on the platform edges, there are tactile strips that are high contrast, so people don't fall off the edge, but they're not in all the stations yet. And actually getting to the part of the platform where you're supposed to board, so you're near the conductor so that they are aware that someone with a disability is trying to board, that just doesn't exist. And we've brought that up many times, and it's hasn't really gone very far. So I think the things that are invisible are like the things that don't exist. It's like the accommodations that can make people travel with more ease and more safely. Also, information is like a huge thing that's lacking, and wayfinding is it's just kind of a disaster in a lot of the stations. So there's New York City, it's not really a disability, but about a quarter of the population is not proficient in English, but we insist on putting all the information in English. There's international design standards that use icons, for example, that are really just easier for anyone to understand, whether you don't speak English or whether you have a cognitive disability or some kind of other learning disability that makes it difficult for you to process information. I think there's other things again that are missing, seating in places. There are some stations where they just refuse to put benches because they're trying to kind of deter homelessness, but it really affects people that have, they may not be in what we typically think of as disabled, but they may have stamina problems or other issues that make standing for a long time difficult. And when you have service levels that are not great, that becomes more of a problem for people. So I think there's just like a lot of little things that, like I said, people don't really think about it unless it affects them. And I think a lot of stuff is just like, it just doesn't exist. And if it did exist, it would make life a lot easier for people to get around.
Right. It's a question of out of sight, out of mind. Certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Anna, same question.
Oh gosh. I think this could covered a lot. I think, here in Washington State, missing sidewalks are a big piece, and then crossings, right? Are crossings accessible? And whether, part of that is, okay, is there an accessible pedestrian signal? Are there curb ramps? But it's also like, okay, are there turning cars that are turning right through the red so there's not time to actually cross safely? Is it a really fast street where the speed of traffic is such that cars are running the light, or there's not gaps? Is it a one-way street where it's really hard to read whether there are gaps in traffic if there's not an accessible pedestrian signal?
Right.
All those things. Is it an unsignalized freeway on-ramp? We have a lot of those in Seattle that are really, really awful and impossible to cross, especially if you are blind or low vision. And we know that, sort of places near big highways, high-speed roads are where the most crashes occur, where drivers are going fastest. And so it can be a real challenge to cross. And then, just the lack of transit, I think is a huge barrier. There's so much of our state where there isn't frequent and reliable transit. And the places that there are increasingly unaffordable. And so, if you're on a limited income, if you're on a fixed income, if you, for whatever reason aren't making a tech worker kind of salary, it can be almost impossible to afford to live in a place that has a reliable bus, that has a connected sidewalk network. And so that housing affordability piece is almost the sort of biggest overarching barrier.
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, we've designed the world around cars, and then people sort of have to fit in the gaps, as it were, and that creates all kinds of problems. John, how about you? Same question.
I was just going to go that direction. I'm going to throw a wild card out here. I think the biggest barrier right now that may be not being thought of is high-speed internet and income inequality. Think about it. You're right. We built our society around cars. The United States is a huge geography. You need a car to get around. Well, except COVID hit, and now all of us are sitting in our living rooms working. And so the accessibility and transportation wasn't roads. It's high-speed internet, right? Because we can level the playing field if we have access to employment, which can happen here on Zoom and Teams a lot more than we ever thought about. Example, we did a project with a big business in let's call it west of Schenectady, and had years and years of meetings west of Schenectady because they were not on the bus line. And so we tried everything we could to get the bus line to change and to get the business to change their business model. They could have done something virtual, they didn't. And then COVID hits, and guess what they all of a sudden ask? How can they hire more remote people? So what I see the most invisible barrier to transportation is high-speed internet. We can expand a lot of what we're doing if we can do it from our computers, phones, tablets, etc. And then the other part of it's money.
Right.
How many of us have been on SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, and are limited to our access in society? One of the things that I'm doing in the next 6 months is building a website, writing some articles on what if we changed our benefits packages from, a social insurance model into universal basic income for people with disabilities, a floor, not a detriment. And so that we have the money to go out and buy the accessible car, to Lori Schaller's opinion or comment in the chat bot, right? Instead of me having to finance and go in debt to do it, what if I had the money to do it right off the bat, right? So there's ways that we can tackle these problems if we look at it differently. We are in a capitalist society. The United States will never not be profit first. So let's use that to our advantage, but change the paradigm and think differently. High-speed internet and universal basic income can do that if we show the profit to society.
Yeah, it's always seemed to me that it's profoundly unfair that a person with disabilities is automatically shunted into this system, not to take up your time, but where you have to jump over this gap in order to even sort of get on the playing field. Never mind whether it's level, but that you have to sort of magic your way towards, even.
Yeah, Jeremy, I was 16 years old, making an extremely adult decision. 16 years old, my parents did not have a lot of money. I had been given some old baseball cards. They were 1950s baseball cards. I had Mickey Mantle, I had Roberto Clemente. I had some really good original baseball cards. Right now,
Right.
I'd be buying a new second house with the baseball card money if I still had them.
Right, but you're
And
forced to, cash in.
Yeah, I sold them in 1983 so that I could pay for hand controls. That's what I did. And did I pay them did I sell them for fair market value? No, I didn't. Did I want the hand controls? Yes, because that was the only way for me to navigate Manchester, New Hampshire in 1984, 85, 86, etc.
Right.
And so there's got to be a better way. But if, I was thinking as Jessica was talking, the way we deal with transportation and economy in the United States, we treat people with disabilities as third and fourth class citizens. But when I traveled to Sydney, Australia, I feel like a first class citizen because I can get around, right? That's wrong. We need to fix that. And in my opinion, including everything everybody else has said, financial stability in a universal basic income and high-speed internet everywhere would be two huge steps.
That's great. And, I think it goes to the point, just to wrap up this particular topic, that, it's not even so much about fixing the systems that we have, but in some ways, in order to really move forward, we need to think about new systems and new ways to solve these problems. Like you said, high-speed internet, universal basic income, getting rid of this, I call it the donut hole, right? Where you get stuck, where you're trying to get off the benefits system and out into the economy, and it's a big leap you have to make. But yeah, thanks. That's great. That's way more stuff than I even thought of when I wrote the question. I sort of just knew there was a gap there that I couldn't quite articulate. So thanks, everyone. All right, before we move into the individual questions for everybody, I have one more general question. And it's actually my favorite one because I couldn't think of the answer to it. So there's an urban rural dichotomy at the heart of the transportation issue. And, in the city, you have existing infrastructure to build on. And so in some ways, half the job is done. You have the infrastructure, it just has to be made accessible. But in rural areas, the infrastructure just doesn't exist. So my thought in writing this question was, how do you address that? In the city, you have something to work with, but in the rural areas, you almost have to, build the stuff and then hope that it all fits together. Let's start with Anna.
There we go. Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, this one's tricky, and Washington State has a lot of rural area. And so I think it is something that we come up against a lot. But I think what we see most often is that people that we work with, because of the opportunities in cities, often do prefer to have the opportunity to live in a city, but the affordable housing just isn't there. And so people feel sort of trapped in more rural areas where perhaps their families live. I grew up in an area without transit or sidewalks, and that's where my parents still are. And that's the case for a lot of disabled folks that I talk to, as they're there because that's the only option. And so how can we create more affordable housing and the support systems we need to be able to live in places where we have the ability to connect with people? And, yes, there's a lot of opportunities for remote work and remote connection right now. But what I've heard informally is that those aren't always substitutes for being able to do something in person, and that at least in my own experience, it hasn't necessarily made me completely happy to be home all the time and not out in the world. And so we're actually doing a new survey right now with the people we work with to understand, how is remote work, remote social activities, how is that working for you? But also how is it not? Are there things that have been replaced by remote that you miss? And sort of how do we create a balance that works? And for everyone, I think that's going to be different, but understanding that conversation a little more deeply, I think, is important.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, remote work is kind of a double-edged sword, right? You it's a good tool, but I don't think we can over rely on it. So yeah, that's great. How about John?
Yeah, I think on top of everything else that I said before, you know, I think if we reimagined the villages that, you know, we built 200 years ago in our rural world, you know, I come from a farming family in central New York, a village of 1,000 people, right? But so maybe we don't need to, you know, do it the way we used to do it. But maybe the village looks different. Maybe the village itself is more accessible, and we navigate that world. So if I can still live in a rural area, but I can have an accessible community in that rural area, that would be beneficial. And then you treat them, you know, like pods that connect to other rural areas in accessible transportation, whether it be rail or accessible Uber or whatever it becomes in the future, because it's whatever it is today won't be that tomorrow. You know, again, I'm a quad amputee. If I lived in the country, you know, there's a trade-off. It is going to be harder for me to live in the country than it is in the city. It just is. That means I got to get my groceries from point A to point B. And I physically can't do that, right? But if I lived upstairs or around the block from a corner store, easier to do. I've done that too. There's trade-offs here, and we don't live in utopia. We can't just blink our eyes and things get here. But you can reimagine certain scenarios. And one of the things I could reimagine is the small village that in and of itself is completely accessible and becomes sort of the hub of a wheel, and that would be cool.
I like that. That's I hadn't considered that, but I like that idea of, you know, that you don't have to, and you can't change the entire world, but that you can make that sort of rural experience accessible and more integrated into the wider world. I mean, I grew up in a small town, you know, in Johnsonville, New York, and you know, it was great. I loved going to my aunt's farm and being outside, and but I would hate to not be in the city where I could get around easy.
Yeah,
So,
and you know, it's something we're talking about, right? So happened to be on the Reimagine the Erie Canal Commission, and they're talking about creating a pocket community up against the Erie Canal of everything's right there, housing's right there, shopping's right there, and employment's right there in a really small village on the Erie Canal. That'd be cool, right? Because then I can get around, I can shop, I can work, and I can still be outside. But I also understand if I lived 20 miles down the road in Cazenovia, I wouldn't expect to be able to be picked up and moved every time I wanted to, because I've chosen to live, you know, off of that pocket community. I think we have to create that paradigm where reimagine the small villages, but understand I still have to get there and do the best we can to be able to do that.
right. Thanks, John. That's great. Jessica, same question.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, one of those, I'm thinking of this research study I read about people that lived in rural, I think it might have been Michigan, where they piloted a voucher program where they would give people a limited number of vouchers that they could use to take a taxi when they needed to travel somewhere. And for many of the people, it was kind of a life-changing thing. And it was really too bad that it was only a pilot, because they said, you know, if I want to go somewhere, I can't drive. And so I feel guilty asking friends or family. And so I don't do the things that I want to do because I feel like I'm a burden on other people and I don't want to feel that way. That was kind of the general sentiment. But then when they had the autonomy and the control over going where they wanted to go, when they wanted to go somewhere, it was, you know, it affected. Some people were taking classes, some people were able to work. You know, it kind of opened up doors and possibilities for people. And so I think, you know, even in small towns, if there is any kind of budget, you know, if there's not a formal public transportation network, some kind of system like this could go a long way to making an impact for people. But I think that's something that people would have to kind of lobby for independently. And I also know that in some places they've created kind of like volunteer systems where people will volunteer to drive people that need rides. I don't know if that's a perfect system because, you know, I think with anything that's like kind of volunteer based, It's easy for people to say sure, but it's also easy for them to kind of back out of it because there's not really any other incentive holding them to do it. So I'm a big fan of trying to always compensate people for any time or effort that they put into something. But I think there is room for creative exploration of making transportation available to people. And I think with like companies like Uber, even though I know that they're not fully accessible, they could help people more. I think Lyft had talked about, trying to offer disabled people a ride to the polls or something. Like, I feel like we could lobby companies to try to think more creatively about how they can help people that need the help the most.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. Again, it's I think it's about, daring to think outside the box. Part of solving these problems seems to be that people just, they look at it and go, oh, that's impossible. And then nobody ever does it. Okay, let's stick with you, Jess, and talk about, which I watched, by the way, The Biggest Obstacle. It was great.
Thank you. So I feel like I can't take credit for this film. A dear friend of mine and was the director and producer. I was kind of an assistant producer in this, but I did help to find people to interview. It didn't actually start out we didn't plan to create a film when we started. Basically, I asked him for help with the project I was working on. Because I wanted to, I have multiple sclerosis, but it doesn't affect my day-to-day life right now. If I'm not in the midst of an exacerbation, my functioning is for the most part normal. But I know that I can't really talk to other disabled people about what they should do. I wanted to hear from disabled people about how they cope with the system, how they make their way in the world. And so I approached him to help me with these interviews because he's a video producer. He was in school doing his MFA and wanted to do like a 10-minute profile about my work because he thought it was interesting. We kind of teamed up and started interviewing people. He started collecting a lot of footage around the subway system. And then he ended up with something like 25 hours worth of footage and said, I think I could make this into a film. So that's where it went. And that's how it happened. So I'm going to share a little preview. It's like a 3-minute clip. And then I hope people will go watch it. So let me share. Yeah.
You'll see a can. Folks, we have a number of public speakers. Jessica Murray.
Good evening. The MTA agreed to make 100 stations wheelchair accessible by 2020. Under Governor Cuomo, the MTA has ignored ADA requirements. We must hold Governor Cuomo accountable.
Accessibility is a right. Fight, fight, fight!
Because MTA elevators are not working? Disgusting, it's deplorable.
The disability community is under attack. The senior population is under attack. Mothers, people with strollers are under attack.
And I'm literally holding on like this going, help me! Help me!
I have a fear of the subway. Most times I encounter problems with elevators not working.
No. Nothing. The thing about finding something is that you have to know that it's there in the first place.
Hi. Do you have any clue to where she may be?
I have no idea where she's at.
It's very, very, very difficult. You just gotta be smart and like be aware of your whole surroundings.
And we call on the MTA to make a legal binding, committing to make the subways fully accessible.
We filed this suit 2 years ago. And what's happened since then? Delay, delay, delay.
To be called Train Daddy is quite, it's bemusing in some ways, but it's quite flattering. I'm Andy Byford, President of New York City Transit. We do need advocates to help us better understand how we can do better.
To make this system, this subway system, fully accessible. It's a huge task. This is a very old system, but we're deadly serious.
We have unleashed something that is not going to be suppressed. The accessibility genie is not going back in the bottle.
Okay, so that's a little sneak peek, and I'm putting a link in the chat. So there's multiple ways you can watch it. It's streaming on a couple of services with or without ads. And a lot of the footage is from the Elevator Action Group, which I've been a member of for, I guess, about 5 years now. And so after Trump got elected, this group called Rise and Resist formed, and they were, created all these working groups to take on like all of these kind of injustices that were about to happen. So there was a working group for immigration, and they're still very active in local and national politics, and they stage a lot of rallies. They know how to get media attention, and Sasha, who was the white person in the wheelchair, is one of the plaintiffs in the recent lawsuit that was settled. And so basically we were kind of, trying to get media out to cover anytime there was a hearing. In this case, we would try to create a rally just to get it in the newspaper and get it front and center and get people talking about it. And also to try to make an impact on the judge who was overseeing that case. And I think we did make a difference. I think he appreciated the interest in the people that showed up hearing after hearing in person. I should say all of this was filmed before the pandemic. Andy Byford, who was the president of New York City Transit until right before the pandemic, he was the last interview we conducted, and it was about a week before all hell broke loose in March of 2020. And he wasn't able to come back into the country after he left. I'm happy to answer questions, but I hope people will watch it. We tried to interview people who were deaf and hard of hearing, blind, low vision, wheelchair users on the autism spectrum, et cetera, trying to get a broad array of different experiences to show what all of the little obstacles are that become big obstacles for people that everyone else may just not be aware of. So it's really about trying to show through the experience of people what they deal with on a day-to-day basis, trying to get around the city.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's a great documentary. Everybody should watch it if they get a chance. I enjoyed it so much that I bought it.
Oh, thanks.
So before I have some more questions for you, Jessica, but before we get there, we put together some poll questions to get some audience feedback. So let's launch into those now. Oh, I'm right. Sorry, I forgot to read the question. Right. So the first poll question was, how many of today's audience identify as a person with a disability? Oh, okay. So that was right. We got a little less than a 50-50 split, but that's good. We've got a diverse group. And here, we'll put that up. It's great. Let's do one more, and then we'll let's do one more poll question, and then we'll talk about your recent interview with the Gothamist. Oh, that's surprising. Oh, so the second question, I'm sorry, I forget that I have to read these things. Have you been impacted by a lack of accessible transportation when you're trying to find a job? And I am surprised that there's so many no's. But that's interesting. All right, well, all right, that's how are we doing on time? We're kind of okay. All right, so yes, let's talk about the article in the Gothamist. So they quoted some, I thought, shocking statistics about their plans for making the New York City subways accessible. You know, one of the talking points that stuck out to me, the article says that there were these proposed contracts valued at $965 million to put in 21 new elevators at 8 stations. I mean, the numbers kind of seem a little crazy, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's like monopoly money or something. It's weird here how much things cost, and you know, I've kind of paid attention to this because, I mean, in my view, if we're overspending on things that we don't necessarily need, then that's just going to make it take longer for us to get the elevators we need. Roughly 25% of the stations are accessible right now, which means, you know, they need to still make, you know, I think it's when the last time I counted, it was like something like 900 more elevators or something like that to make the system accessible. So that's a lot of money that needs to go into that. But there is almost no insight into what that money is going towards. So they just put these big numbers, and, you know, you can, if you try to dig deeper, all you can find is the materials that they present to the board for approval. And so they just have these big packages that it's like, oh, these 8 stations are going to be renovated, and then it's, you know, these are going to get new elevator replacements. They don't break it down into like which ones, how much does an elevator replacement cost versus a whole new elevator. That's a pretty important thing to know. How much of this is labor? Like how can we save money on labor if it does cost this much? I mean, New York City, I don't know if people follow, you know, the 2nd Avenue subway is the most expensive mile of subway in the world ever built. They spent 7 times more on that subway line, which only has a few stations at this point, than any other country. So it's like the costs are just kind of out of control. And I don't know how much they are interested in kind of getting them back under control. And I feel like without that transparency of like, where is every single dollar going? How can we really affect the change? And so, you know, some of the recent renovations that they've done, for example, have, you know, they sometimes have to build a ramp to get to the elevator because, you know, the stations are all just kind of bespoke. Every single one's different because it was built 100 years ago. And so they have to do some creative things to make them accessible. But one station, I think it's the City Hall station, they put this glass barrier all the way around this long ramp. And it's like, how much does that glass barrier cost? And is that necessary? Like, could we use a cheaper material, or do we even need that there? Like, I know you need handrails, for example, but like, at what point are these costs just kind of excessive and making some contractor very wealthy? I don't know, because we have no insight into what they're spending. And I think, you know, part of the settlement, which is still kind of being finalized, and you know, it's not all the ink is not dry on the whole thing yet. But it will be kind of certified soon. Part of the agreement is that they're going to spend I think it's like 14.5% of the station's capital budget on accessibility improvements, generally speaking. So that includes elevators, tactile warning strips, other accessibility features. So if we have no insight into how these costs break down, if they're just kind of spending a percentage of the budget, are we going to get our money's worth? I mean, I think, their track record to me says no. And the costs of stations have pretty much like doubled when you look at like 10 years ago. Right. And there's really no explanation for any of it. So it's all very worrying and very frustrating because it just delays progress.
And then there was another shocking statistic quoted in the article, which made me sad and laugh at the same time. I believe the article said that the MTA gave an estimate of when they would have not all of the stations, but weirdly 95% of them accessible. They said by 2055, which I did some quick math, I will be 68.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little discouraging.
Yeah, it is a little discouraging. I mean, I don't know, I think at some point it's like, they had this key station agreement that, it was mentioned in the trailer that by 2020, they were supposed to finish all 100 key stations. They did not. They still have not finished all 100 key stations. There's still one that has been hung up because of community obstruction, basically at 68th Street, Hunter College. And, since the MTA being the MTA kind of, as the deadline was approaching, tried to hurry up and get them all done. So they did like 11 in 1 year. And it was like, wow, that's like, look how much we did. They were doing like around 3 or 4 a year before that. And so they wanted to give themselves a big pat on the back. And it's like, well,
right.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, because it's a system. If all of the stations are inaccessible, it doesn't matter how many, because the goal has to be 100%, right?
Right. So I guess, yeah, so they convinced themselves that like, we did this huge number, 10 stations, and like, that's about the most we can do because of, there's only so many construction companies that can build these elevators. There's only so many elevator companies. We have limited people to manage these contracts, and like, that's our capacity. So that's kind of what the number is based on, just because of the huge number that's left. But had there not been this this kind of fake expectation that like, oh, we can just do these 100 and then that's good enough. If they had been striving for 100% accessibility the whole time and been doing 10 a year the whole time, we'd be a lot closer than we are today. And another issue with the key stations agreement is that New York likes to count transfer stations. So if there's a station that has multiple lines that intersect, they don't count it as one station. They count it as 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 stations. And so they kind of padded their numbers in that way as well. But the definition of a key station is the endpoints of the lines. Transfer stations are key stations. Stations that get a lot of traffic, stations near cultural institutions or healthcare centers, educational institutions, places of importance, those are also important. So, if you counted all of those, we probably should have had a lot more stations if we're going to count transfers as multiple stations. So there's still a handful of these complex stations that are still not accessible. And if they were, that would give people more reach because they could actually get onto different trains and go to other places, not just on the route. Yeah. So
it's funny. I was in the city recently with a friend, and I had said to him the exact same thing that you just did, which is, if they just did 10 of these things a year, at some point, right, just sheer numbers wise, they would have to be done. I mean, and they might not be perfect, but I mean, at least you would be done to an extent that you could tweak at that point. But if they're never going to finish,
Yeah. And the maintenance and the upkeep and the having working elevators all the time is like, that's the next fight because, even if you have elevators are up 95% of the time, you know, if you have to take 4 or 5 elevators to get somewhere, then your chances of encountering a broken elevator or an out of service elevator increase with the number, you know, so it's like it just becomes, it should be more like 99%, you know, like Boston settled a lawsuit, and that was that's what their goal is 99% uptime, and it makes a huge difference for people being able to use the system.
Yeah, because I mean, you could actually get trapped. In fact, and then we'll move to John, but in fact, I did as a kid, just before 9/11, I went down to the city to see like the Museum of Natural History and the Statue of Liberty and all the touristy things that you do the first time in New York, and I totally got trapped in the subway because, you know, you find one accessible station, and if you can't find the second one, oops.
Yeah, when you're underground and your cell phone doesn't work, or, you know, and I mean, they have Wi-Fi in a lot of the stations now, but, you know, we were trying to get them to put kind of signs that tell you where to go if the elevator's out of service, and they started putting some up, but I think they backtracked on it because it kind of showed like people without disabilities would be like, oh, wow, look at what you have to do if you can't get out of the subway right here. And I think they realized that was not a good look. And so they kind of, they told us it was vandalism, but I'm not sure if I believe that, that people were taking the alternate route signs down. But I think that's, you know, the kind of information that would really help people feel more confident going down there, because a lot of people do have a fear of getting stuck underground. And I know multiple people who have had to be evacuated and basically carried out of stations because of broken elevators, which is just, it's not right.
Yeah. So thanks for, the article was great. Anybody interested in reading, I don't have the link on me, but I mean, if you Google it, the article will come up. It was a great piece. Lots of food for thought. And thanks, Jess, for that breakdown of their crazy scheme to maybe, before I retire, like fix the New York City subways.
Thanks for letting me share.
Yeah. John, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately. I had one question for you, and well, a couple actually. So, you know, your area of expertise, so to speak, is employment. So I know you've touched on this a little bit, but, you know, specifically, what would you say is the interplay between transportation and employment?
I think it's access, right? So the interplay is how can I get to work? If you're reading the chats, to Darlene's point, you know, how do you get to work if you're not able to drive yourself to work or not able to use public transportation? In my world, if I were living in Albany, or if I were living in New York City, I mean, I wouldn't go into the subway for that very reason. I can't navigate the stairs, and I won't put myself in a trap situation ever again. So the interplay is we have to think about, again, we have to change our paradigm. We have to think about a new way of doing business. Now, pre-COVID, corporate America was not going to do that. Post-COVID, post-immigration, if we're not going to open up our borders and we're going to keep with the same workforce, we have to think about a new paradigm. So businesses are more welcoming to new ideas, and we have to lead that. So example, I live in a community where I can drive myself to everywhere that I need to go, and I never have to rely on public transportation. Again, if that's the way I've built myself to be able to navigate my transportation employment experience. I think what you're going to find though in time are what I said previously, pocket communities, where if I use a wheelchair in the future, I'll be able to work, play, recreate, shop, and live in that pocket community. And because we're not going to expand our workforce in the old traditional US ways, businesses will eventually do that. They will create communities in pockets, whether it be rural or urban, so that I can live, work, and play in the same space. You know, example, we've done some work with a major corporation in Toronto, Ontario. They are a general contractor. They build high-rise buildings for residential purposes. They've built that where you can live, work, shop, and play in the same building or in the same block. And so 54 years old, that's what I would be looking for. You know, am I going to change myself now at 54 and try to change the world around me? Listen, I know Governor Cuomo had no interest in disability. So why am I beating my head against a society that doesn't want me there? Rather, you know what? I can take my tax dollars and I can go somewhere else and live in that community that at least gives me an equal opportunity. You know, I'm listening to watching that video in New York City, and if I lived in New York City, I'd be gone. I'd be gone, because you know what? New York City does not want me, and there are other communities that do want me. And once you open your eyes up to that, then it's a game changer.
And I think that's sad, because I mean, you know, having just come back from the city a month ago, it's, you know, for all of the obstacles, there's so many wonderful things to do. It's just that to do all of them is real, I guess I'll censor myself for Zoom, but pain in the neck. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and it's true. There are so many great things to do in a city, but you know what? I'd rather be in Toronto where I can navigate it, right?
Yeah.
And so once you, listen, I am born and raised in New York, but once you get out of New York, there's other places to go. Boston, a great example of an old old architecture city that is coming up. So we have to use our $1 trillion of buying power as people with disabilities to change the world. But if the world doesn't want to change with us, get up, get out, and move. And move our families and move our friends and do it that way. Because look what happened during COVID. You kept seeing stories about landlords freaking out that people weren't paying their rent anymore. They changed how they did business because they wanted people to come back.
Right.
Well, same with us.
And right, it takes
change how we do
these
business.
seismic moments to get people to say, oh, we can do remote work, and we can change the way that we've done business, or the way that we've thought about whatever the issue might be. So
yeah.
And turning on that point, do you want to talk a little bit? I know that we're a little bit tight on time, but do you want to talk a little bit about what maybe the positive side of the COVID-19 pandemic is? That it's you know, remote work is now a reality. I'm working remotely right now hosting this. But do you want to talk a little bit about how that's a double-edged sword in some ways?
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, listen, COVID has opened up our eyes to a new way to do work, a new way to do business, but also more mental health issues. And I think it's a great opportunity for people with disabilities to be able to work and create some economic stability through remote work. Out of our 83,000 jobs, we're seeing the word remote or virtual or hybrid way up more often on a tech basis than we ever did before. But when that happens, we also have to make sure that we do connect in person and not to lose that part of ourselves. But it doesn't mean we have to get up and go to work in an office. We can connect with other people in another way. And so because businesses come to us, we should take advantage of that and take that economic power, harness it, and move it forward. The double-edged sword is we can't lose our emotional well-being, but our emotional well-being can be helped in other ways than just 9 to 5 in the office. Even though I'm sitting in an office, I'd rather be in my living room. Trust me.
Yeah. So, and okay, I think we're actually a little better than I thought. So yes, no, I agree. I agree with all that. And I feel the same way. Like it's you know, it's an opportunity, but also kind of, you know, you get this feeling like you're always stuck in the house.
Well, and I think one thing I would beg everybody to think about, we don't have to keep pushing the rock up the hill. We could actually just stop pushing the rock up the hill, go to a different hill. You know, why are we constantly fighting a system that doesn't want to work with us? Rather than let's create new systems. That's the older I get, the more that I come to that realization.
It's true. I mean, in some ways, maybe COVID gives us the chance to do that, because now suddenly people have said, oh, we can't do remote work, and now everybody's doing it, and it's never going to go away. And in fact, and you know, you can see how maybe that will bleed into transportation as an issue, that, you know, finally people want to say, oh geez, you know, maybe we can fix some of these things. But let me talk to you now for a sec about you. Our Ability, your company, recently won an award from the Zero Project. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've been recognized by the Zero Project, an international organization on accessibility, for our work that we're doing in our AI portal. You know, like as I mentioned, we have 83,000 jobs and growing, 71 companies and growing, and 2,600 full profiles from individuals with disabilities looking for a job. You know, we're not just your mom and dad's job board. We actually are trying to match algorithmically people to employment. It's nice to be recognized. What's really maybe more important is we're now a tech company. We're a tech company owned and run by people with disabilities, coded by people with disabilities, thinking about changing the paradigm. So if we're sick of job descriptions that say must have a driver's license, you know what? We're working with corporate America to change that language. If we're thinking about we can't get our job coach to place us where we want to go because we don't want to work where they're asking us to go, you know what? We can do it differently. We're using technology to change it. And we're doing it because the whole world is living on our iPhones or Androids, right? So why don't we harness that for our purposes? And as people with disabilities, we become great technologists. Let's lean into it and grow that. And so that's what we've been doing. We're really proud. Could not be more proud of what's going on.
Right, that's great. All right, I'm gonna mix up the way that I had things in the agenda a little bit, just because I want to fit in everything that I had planned. So let's turn to, I was going to do some more poll questions, but let's turn to Anna. Anna, tell us about your Week Without Driving campaign.
Yeah, awesome. So we last year started a challenge that we call the Week Without Driving Challenge. And this came from the realization that many of our elected leaders have no idea what it's like to try to get around using the bus, using paratransit, walking places, and their ease of getting around is something that they're just not really aware that so many of us, at least a quarter of the population here in Washington State, don't have access to hop in a car and go where we want to go when we want to go there. And so this was a way for them to experience that for a week so they could start to better understand the gaps in the system and then be better allies when we came to them to say, hey, we need some more sidewalk funding. Hey, we need better transit service. And so I'm going to show a really quick video from this year. And actually, we just finished this video yesterday. So you're my first screening audience, featuring some of the elected leaders and what they realized and started to think about as a result of this challenge. And so let's see, as I pull this up, just make sure. Yep. All right. Let's try to roll this. And I will paste the transcript in the chat as well.
What I thought I knew about transit, what I thought I knew about the user experience was very transformed the past week in the Week Without Driving.
It's a lot different to choose to not drive versus to not be able to drive.
Whenever I wanted to go somewhere, I had to plan a lot of additional time.
But it changed my whole life. I had to think about, how do I pick up dog food for my very large dog that eats a lot? How do I get to work every day and make sure that I can move around safely? I had to think about when I can leave, how I get there, what I'm gonna wear.
I did keep a journal, and since you want to see this, so I had to get rides back and forth to city council meetings.
It's frankly kind of hard to imagine how someone who didn't have access to a car, how they could do the job of a city council member. That means we have voices that aren't being heard in leadership.
When I participated in the Week Without Driving, I ended up on one of these roads where there was no sidewalk and there was very limited space between the road and cars flying by me.
This would have been very challenging. I think about this a lot when I had kids at home who, were counting on me for rides everywhere.
I think it reinforces the holes in our ped bike transportation system. If you're not out there walking and biking and experiencing it, you have no idea how important it is to fill those holes.
What are the ways in which the decisions that I make as a school board director can emphasize
We want you to be here because we've thought about the bus schedules when we planned when this was going to happen.
This is my second year joining the Week Without Driving, and it is a challenge, and I think that that's such a great thing for me as policymaker to understand.
By the end of the week, I was realizing that I was like feeling a little bit blue because I just hadn't had the social connections that I usually do.
When we plan our routes of public transit, I know that hospitals are included, but those aren't always all of our medical services.
Why would we be building car-dependent urban space when we shouldn't expect people to drive as they become elders?
If the Week Without Driving, if that was new to you, then you gain firsthand experience about the everyday reality for 25% or more of the Washington residents we serve who don't drive.
The Disability Mobility Initiative is a program of Disability Rights Washington. Support for the Week Without Driving provided by Amazon.
All right, and let me paste that transcript and a link to the video on YouTube as well, if you want to check it out later, into the chat.
It looks like
yeah, questions, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually had a couple more questions for you, but I know that we're sort of tight on time. So I just wanted to ask, what were some challenges with getting, sort of politicians to buy into the Week Without Driving campaign? And sort of, did you have any advice if anybody wanted to sort of set up this kind of event in their own area?
Yeah, I mean, so this year we had around over 400 folks sign up to participate. And 80 of those were elected leaders and public officials. We also spent a lot of time doing outreach to our State Department of Transportation, transit agencies. We had 15 transit agencies sign on to the event, and to local transportation departments like the Seattle Department of Transportation, really encourage their staff to participate. And so, it was through those partnerships that I think we were able to really build participation. We also partnered with other advocacy orgs, disability, transportation, environmental groups to have them help us reach out to elected leaders because frankly, we don't have relationships with everyone everywhere. We'd love to have every elected in the state get an invite, but we don't have those personal relationships. And so partnering with other organizations who could co-host with us and then extend the invitation really made a huge difference. So as we go forward, we're going to be trying to do more local events next year. We had one in-person event this year in Tacoma, but we want to be able to have some of our local advocates host events in their communities where they specifically invite elected leaders and then are able to build those relationships and hold people accountable. Hold electeds accountable to, doing the things and fighting for the funding that they commit to fighting for.
Great, thanks. All right, I think that we're pretty much out of time, but if there were any questions, I don't see any in the chat. We had a couple more poll questions. We might have time for one or two of those. We had a poll question about the Week Without Driving event. Let's throw that up there and see if we get how many people would be theoretically interested. Oh, and I'm sorry, the question, by the way, is would you be interested in participating in the Week Without Driving? All right, so it looks like we got numbers are changing. So yeah, it seems like most people are interested. That's great. All right. Well, it looks like we have a little bit of time left. By the way, everybody out there listening, you can throw your questions into the chat if you have any. We had a couple of poll questions left, but I don't remember the order they were in. David, if you're listening, you can just throw them out there. This one. Have you ever been dissuaded from making a major life decision, going to college, looking for a house or apartment, taking a vacation, going to the doctor's office, et cetera, because of lack of accessible transportation? So that was almost an even split. So that's interesting. It is about as diverse of a group as I figured. Did we did we have, oh, here's the next one, right. Right. What do you think is the biggest obstacle to accessible transportation? And this one's multiple choice, so lack of sidewalks, inadequate snow removal, lack of public transportation options, or something else that I didn't think of. But it looks like everybody's voting for lack of public transportation options, which I guess is not surprising given everything that we've discussed. Yeah, car culture. Somebody just put, yeah, I mean, that's true. We built the world for the automobile. Pretty, I mean, it's some diversity in the answers, right? But mostly people are saying lack of public transportation. Well, I guess now that we have like something like 2 minutes left, this was great. I had a good time. I hope everybody else did. And thank you to our wonderful panel, and for everyone that helped out. David, thank you for everything. Catherine, everybody. This was a fun time. And you know, happy holidays, by the way.
Thanks for inviting me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Nice to meet you all too.
Yeah.